Over the last few years, I've really started to enjoy wider lenses like a 28mm more often than the portrait focal lengths I started with at the beginning of my career. My problem though was that I've never found a 28mm lens that checked all the boxes that I wanted. That might change today because a relatively new company, Thypoch, has made a 28mm f1.4 that I think might solve a lot of the issues I've had with other 28mm lenses I've used in the past. Let's see if this lens is any good. If I could sum up the look of this 28mm Simera in one word, it would be balanced. One of the most important aspects of a lens to me personally is that it does not feel clinical. I define a lens as clinical when it meets these criteria. It's too sharp, particularly on people's skin where it displays every flaw. It lacks a smooth transition from in focus to out of focus elements. It has an overly neutral or cold color cast to the images. The overall aesthetic looks bland and too true to life. Obviously, each lens will vary to what degree it does or doesn't have any of these criteria, but these are generally things I'm considering when picking a lens. I was pleasantly surprised by the Thypoch Simera 28mm during my testing. This lens balances all the elements I'm looking for really well. From a sharpness standpoint, to me, the Simera is right where I want it to be. It's not overly sharp, but it also doesn't swing too far the other way into a super soft mess, even wide open. This is ideal because I didn't have to think about whether the lens would perform well at a given f-stop. It remained fairly consistent across the range. If you're like me and you're a fan of the wide lens look at a fast aperture, this Simera delivers on that look as well. Shots at f1.4 remain sharp enough in the center and fall off in a really pleasing way as you look towards the edges. As I moved up the range from f2 to f5.6, I was only more impressed with the overall performance. The look manages to feel sharp and detailed without becoming clinical. Chromatic aberration is also really well controlled on this lens. I did not find many instances where I noticed it at all, even when the shot was backlit. Bokeh on this lens is smooth looking with no harsh busyness, so you could even use this for wide angle portraits and get a really nice look. Flaring is pretty well controlled, maybe even too well controlled for my personal taste, but I did manage to get an interesting rainbow flare in certain shots. If you tend to dislike lens flare, this Simera performs quite well and is unlikely to cause major issues, especially when paired with the included square lens hood. The only minor con I found from an image quality standpoint is wide open. You can experience shots where vignetting is noticeable, but honestly, it doesn't feel like any more noticeable than other lenses with the same specs that I've tried, and it is really easy to clean up in post. Before we take a look at what this lens was like from a usability standpoint, I want to take a quick break to thank today's sponsor, Artlist. Artlist is an all-in-one platform with hundreds of thousands of premium songs, SFX, footage, templates, plugins, and their brand new AI voiceover feature. Here's how it works. You can pick from a wide variety of professional sounding voice actor options, then just type out your script to create a custom voiceover for your project.
I'm actually going to have a voiceover read the rest of this integration so that you guys get a sense of what this sounds like. What you are hearing now is the rural male voice, but they have many different kinds of voices available.
Like this female reveal voice, which is designed to inspire and engage your audience. There are even customizable settings that you can tweak to get a different emotional range. Change the similarity to the original voice, and add a style boost to vary how the voiceover feels for your specific project.
This feature is included with Artlist Max, but for those of you who think you'd only need this feature, Artlist is also offering a dedicated voiceover plan at an affordable price. This new voiceover feature is exclusive to Artlist and built for creators to save you time and resources. You can check it out for yourself at the first link in the video description. Thank you to Artlist for making this video possible. Now back to Brandon's voice so he can finish telling you about the Thypoch Simera 28mm.
I just want to take a second to acknowledge how cool an experience it was to make this section of the video. Now let's get back to the lens. Considering how much I liked the image quality from the Simera, I had high hopes that the usability would match up. While the experience of this lens wasn't bad overall, it does have a few quirks. From a build standpoint, this lens is amazing. The body is machined beautifully and it feels really premium in the hand. Thypoch actually loaned me an additional version of this lens for Fuji X mount, and they do differ slightly. The Leica M version, which is the one I use the majority of the time, has an infinity lock on the focus ring. This means that when you get to the end of the lens near infinity, it can lock into place even when you don't want it to, and it can be kind of annoying to focus slightly before infinity. On the Fuji X mount version, Thypoch listened to user feedback and changed the focusing tab on the lens to a more present day thumb grip. This change solves my usability gripe with the infinity lock and makes focusing the lens feel a lot more intuitive. I do hope that Thypoch eventually changes the M mount version to this same focusing tab, but even if they don't, I did eventually get used to it and it began to bother me less. One really unique feature that the Simera 28mm has is the iris toggle. You have the option to make your iris clicked or declicked, which I think is super cool and also gives this lens a place for video shooters who want that smooth transition between stops. This isn't a surprising inclusion considering that Thypoch's parent company is DZO Film, who have made a name for themselves making budget cinema lenses for the film industry. It's clear their expertise making those lenses has translated at least somewhat to the Simera line. The last notable feature with regards to the iris is this dot system that acts as a depth of field indicator. This feature is cool in theory and visually it looks nice. In practice, I didn't find myself really utilizing it that much, and honestly, I was a bit concerned about taking this lens out on a day where it rained because any amount of water going into these tiny holes is unlikely to be a good thing long term. It's not a bad feature, but I could easily have lived without it. Perhaps my favorite thing about the Simera is the minimum focus distance on this lens. It's 0.4 meters or 1.3 feet, which is one of the best I've seen from a 28mm f1.4. I love being able to get super close with this lens. It honestly felt like I was experiencing a slightly new look because no 28mm I've used can natively get this close to a subject. I will note that if you are a rangefinder shooter past 0.7 meters, the focusing patch will not properly be calibrated, but if you mainly shoot with an EVF like I do, this is a non-issue. The focus ring itself is a bit close to the lens mount, so if you have large hands, this may be annoying, but having owned other lenses with a similar focus ring, this didn't really bother me. Lastly, the overall size of this lens is pretty impressive when stacked up against my older and heavier 7 Artisan 28mm f1.4 that I reviewed last year. The Simera isn't small, but it's perfectly manageable, and considering it's more than 100 grams lighter than my older 28mm, this has a much better chance of living on my camera for long periods of time. I do want to note that the X mount and other versions of this lens are slightly bigger than the M mount version. When you factor in the extra macro capability you can get from a helicoid M mount adapter to any mirrorless camera, I still believe the M mount version is the preferable choice since you can adapt it to more cameras if you ever decide to change systems, future-proofing your investment. So unless the infinity lock is a deal breaker for you or you're the type of person who prefers to shoot using only native lenses, that would be my pick. Thypoch has done really well making a lens that is not too big, not too heavy, has a fast aperture, excellent construction, and a balanced look that I believe most people would be able to appreciate. It's not perfect. The infinity lock on the M mount version, the close to lens mount focus ring may be deal breakers to some, but the look alone, in my opinion, is worth the price of admission. At $699 USD, this lens isn't cheap, but it is far from the most expensive option in its category. Between the optional declicked aperture to the excellent minimum focus performance and well-balanced overall look, I have a hard time imagining why you would need to justify buying a more expensive 28mm. So if you're the kind of person who wants to experiment or already knows you like this focal length, I'd seriously consider picking up the Simera because this lens exceeded my expectations, especially for a company that is fairly new on the scene. If you guys like this video, you may also like the video I made about my previous 28mm from 7 Artisans that I took all around Europe. Thank you so much for watching.